The eviction notice on my apartment door wasn't just paper. It was their final signature on a life they'd erased me from. 3 years of deafening silence from my own family, and this was their parting gift. I'm Evelyn Hayes. For over a decade, I wasn't just an architect at Sterling Designs. I was the one sketching its future, believing our shared name meant an unbreakable bond. I thought loyalty was a currency that bought you a seat at the table. That dedication would be met with unwavering support, especially from blood. I learned the hard way that some family ties are only strong when they're pulling something from you, not holding you up. If you've ever poured your soul into something, only to have the architects of your life try to bulldoze your foundations, you'll want to hear how I redrew my own. It's funny, the things you remember. I can still feel the specific texture of the drafting paper under my fingertips, the way the morning light used to hit my desk at Sterling Designs. For years, that company wasn't just a job. It was family, or so I believed. I poured everything I had into it. I was the one who championed sustainable design, long before it was trendy. I brought in new ideas, pushed boundaries, and honestly, I helped build the reputation Sterling Designs enjoyed. Those awards we won for eco-friendly architecture. Those were my projects, my vision. I'd work late, sketching, researching. Driven by this deep-seated belief that what we were creating was important, that it was a legacy. Our legacy, but legacies, I've learned, can be rewritten by those who hold the pen. The first signs were subtle, like hairline cracks in a foundation you don't notice until the whole structure starts to shift. My brother, Mark, he was always ambitious, but his ambition often outpaced his talent. As my projects gained recognition, his demeanor soured. In meetings, my ideas would be met with a dismissive wave of his hand or a condescending, "That's a bit idealistic, Evelyn, don't you think?" My father, Robert, the head of the company, the patriarch, he started siding with Mark more and more. It was always excused as Mark learning the ropes or giving him more responsibility. I tried to tell myself it was just family dynamics, the usual sibling rivalry. I was, perhaps, too naive. Or maybe I just didn't want to see ... Then came the day the ground truly fell out from under me. The company, they said, was facing financial difficulties. Looking back, I realized it was likely a series of Mark's misjudgments, carefully swept under the rug by my father. But at the time, all I knew was the cold dread that filled the conference room. It was just me, Dad, and Mark. No HR, no formal procedure. Just the three of us, in a room that suddenly felt too small, too sterile. Dad, his face unreadable, cleared his throat. "Evelyn," he began, his voice devoid of any warmth, "we've had to make some tough decisions. We're restructuring, and your position is no longer essential. No longer essential." The words hung there, sharp and brutal. My mind reeled. I, who had poured my heart and soul into this place, who had designed half the award-winning buildings in their portfolio. I was no longer essential. I looked from my father's stoic face to Mark's, which held a flicker of something I couldn't quite place then, but now I recognize as satisfaction. I stammered something about my projects, my contributions. Dad just shook his head. "This is business, Evelyn. Sometimes these things happen. You should have some savings, shouldn't you?" His voice was like ice, no empathy, no apology, just dismissal. I turned to my mother, Diane, later that day, desperate for some comfort, some sign that this wasn't real. She wrung her hands, her eyes darting away from mine. "Oh, sweetie." "I'm so sorry," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "But you know your father, when he makes up his mind." "Well, maybe this is an opportunity for you to find a new path. I'll pray for you." No fight for me, no outrage, just resignation. And a quiet suggestion that I was the one who needed to find a new path. As if I'd chosen this, Mark, of course, was even less charitable. I confronted him, foolishly hoping for some explanation, some brotherly something. He just scoffed. "You should have known your place sooner, Evelyn. Sterling Designs needs someone with a more practical vision, not all those green fantasies. And maybe you should reevaluate your spending habits instead of blaming the circumstances." The smirk on his face, the casual cruelty in his tone, that's what broke me more than anything. It wasn't just business, it was personal. The final blow came via email, a cold, formal termination letter, a paltry severance package, and a curt request to clear out my office by the end of the day. I stood in the space I had so lovingly designed, the warm wood, the carefully chosen plants, the sketches pinned to the wall. All of it suddenly alien. It felt like they hadn't just taken my job. They'd taken a part of my soul. I packed my belongings into a few cardboard boxes, the silence of the office deafening, each item a painful reminder of a future that had just been stolen from me. The future I thought we were building together. The weeks that followed were a blur of disbelief and annoying, hollow ache. My savings, which I'd always thought were substantial, dwindled with alarming speed. Rent, bills, the basics, it all added up. I started selling things, first the little luxuries, then pieces of furniture I loved, pieces I'd carefully chosen for my small apartment. My car, a reliable sedan I'd had for years, was next. Each sale felt like another piece of myself being chipped away. The shame was a constant companion, a heavy cloak I couldn't shed. Then came the eviction notice. That stark white paper taped to my door, the bold, impersonal letters demanding I vacate. I remember sinking to the floor in the hallway, the cheap carpet rough against my cheek, and just sobbing. It was the kind of raw, helpless grief that shakes you to your core. This wasn't just about losing an apartment. It was about losing everything. My career, my financial stability, and most painfully, my family. The people who were supposed to be my safety net had not only failed to catch me, they'd actively pushed me off the ledge. That night, packing what little I had left into duffel bags, was one of the lowest points of my life. The landlord, a gruff man who'd always been pleasant enough, avoided my eyes. I could feel his pity, and it burned more than any anger could have. I had nowhere to go, no family to turn to. The silence from them was absolute, a confirmation of their abandonment, so I did the only thing I could. I put my remaining belongings into the trunk of my old, beat-up car, the one I'd managed to keep by selling almost everything else, and I drove. Those first few nights sleeping in my car, I don't think I'll ever forget the bone-chilling cold, the constant fear. I'd park in dimly lit corners of 24-hour supermarket lots, wedging myself into the driver's seat, trying to make myself as small as possible. Every sound, every passing car sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not really. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Evelyn Hayes, architect, daughter of Robert Hayes of Sterling Designs, was homeless. My days became a carefully constructed routine of survival. I'd wake up before sunrise, before security guards might start their rounds. I kept my gym membership active, not for fitness, but for the showers, washing my hair in a public sink, changing clothes in a cramped bathroom stall, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. It was humiliating. The library became my office, free Wi-Fi, a quiet place to job search, a temporary escape from the harsh reality of my car. I sent out countless applications, tailored cover letters, anything to claw my way back. Just when I felt like I was drowning, a small, unexpected lifeline appeared. I'd forced myself to attend a free workshop on soft skills, mostly to be around people, to feel human again. That's where I met Chloe Park. She was a freelance marketing consultant, bright, energetic, with a no-nonsense attitude. She saw something in me. I guess maybe it was the exhaustion in my eyes. Or maybe it was the stubborn set of my jaw, We started talking, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. Then, another chance encounter. I ran into Ethan Vance at a small industry networking event I'd almost not attended. Ethan and I had worked on a joint project years ago, when I was still at Sterling. He was always one of the good ones, talented, kind, with a genuine passion for design. He'd since started his own small firm, Phoenix Creatives. When he heard what had happened to me, his surprise was genuine. He didn't offer pity, just understanding. And then he offered me a part-time position. The pay was modest, barely enough to cover gas and food, but it was a start. It was a hand reaching out in the darkness. It was hope. Working at Phoenix Creatives was like breathing fresh air after being trapped underwater. Ethan's office was small, a bit chaotic. Nothing like the polished, corporate feel of Sterling Designs, but it was real. It was honest. The projects were smaller, the budgets tighter, but I poured every ounce of myself into them. I was determined to prove my worth, not just to Ethan, but to myself. I needed to know that the architect in me, the one Sterling Designs had discarded, was still alive. Evenings were spent doing freelance drafting work, anything to make ends meet. I'd sit in my car, laptop balanced on my knees, the dome light casting a dim glow, and I'd draw. It was exhausting. Working virtually around the clock, but it was also empowering. I was fighting back, one line on a blueprint, one small project at a time. Chloe became my rock. We'd meet for cheap coffee, sharing stories, frustrations, and the occasional, much-needed laugh. She had this incredible ability to see through the bullshit, to call things as they were. One day, she found me particularly despondent, and she just said, we could get a place together. Split the rent. It'd be cheaper than whatever you're doing now. And just like that, the idea took root. A month later, we moved into a tiny, slightly rundown 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't much, but it had walls, a roof, and a door that locked. After months in my car, it felt like a palace. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I had a home. A safe space. At Phoenix Creatives, things started to pick up. Ethan saw my dedication, my talent. He started giving me more responsibility, bigger projects. The ones that required a creative spark, a thoughtful approach. Our little company began to win bids against larger, more established firms. There was a quiet satisfaction in that, a validation that Sterling Designs had been wrong about me. Or perhaps they'd known my worth all along, and that's what Mark, and maybe even my father, couldn't stand. I didn't stop there. I knew I needed to keep growing, keep learning. I enrolled in evening classes, project management, new design software, even a basic business course. I was rebuilding myself, skill by skill, brick by brick. There was a quiet intensity to my focus. The pain of my family's betrayal was still there, a dull ache in the background. But it no longer consumed me. It fueled me. It was at an industry networking event, one Chloe had practically dragged me to, that I met Liam Carter. He was a financial consultant, calm, intelligent, with kind eyes that seemed to see more than most. We started talking, and it was easy. He wasn't intimidated by my past or by the quiet resolve I carried. Our relationship grew slowly, organically, built on mutual respect and a shared understanding of life's unexpected turns. He helped me see myself not as a victim, but as a survivor. He helped me believe in my own strength again. A year to the day after I'd been forced out of Sterling Designs, I took a moment to reflect. I was sitting in my small, shared apartment, a cup of tea warming my hands. I had a job I was good at, a true friend in Chloe, a budding relationship with Liam. I was independent. I was okay, more than okay. The gaping wound my family had left was still there, but it was beginning to scar over. It no longer defined every waking moment. I was Evelyn Hayes, architect, survivor. And I was building something new, something entirely my own. 3 years. 3 years can feel like a lifetime. Or a blink. For me, it was a period of intense rebuilding. Phoenix Creatives had grown beyond Ethan's wildest dreams, and I was now the lead designer, a key part of its success. I'd worked tirelessly, saved diligently, and finally, I'd done something I once thought impossible. I bought my own house. A small, charming bungalow in a quiet suburb, with a little garden in the back. It wasn't grand. Not like the sprawling homes Sterling Designs built for their wealthy clients, but it was mine. Every nail, every floorboard represented my sweat, my resilience, my independence. That particular Sunday morning started like any other in my new home. The sun was streaming through the kitchen window. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. I was curled up on my favorite armchair in the living room, a book open in my lap, a rare moment of perfect, uninterrupted peace. This house, it was my sanctuary, a testament to how far I'd come. Then the doorbell rang, sharp, insistent. I wasn't expecting anyone. I considered ignoring it, but the ringing was followed by a series of impatient knocks. With a sigh, I put down my book and walked to the door. When I opened it, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. There, on my porch, stood my past, my father, Robert, looking older, more careworn than I remembered. My mother, Diane, her face etched with a forced, nervous brightness. And my brother, Mark, with his wife, Rachel, and their 2 children, who I barely recognized. They were surrounded by suitcases, a small mountain of luggage, as if they were planning an extended stay. My mind struggled to process the scene. 3 years. 3 years of absolute, deafening silence, no calls, no texts, not even a Christmas card. And now, here they were on my doorstep, unannounced. "Evelyn, darling," my mother exclaimed, her voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. She lunged forward for a hug I didn't reciprocate. I just stood there, frozen. "Oh, look at your house. It's lovely." "We just had to come see it." My father, ever the pragmatist, was already peering past me into the hallway. "Nice neighborhood," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Good investment." Mark just nodded, a faint, unreadable expression on his face. "Kids, say hello to your Aunt Evelyn," he instructed, nudging his son forward. The boys stared at me blankly. Rachel, meanwhile, was already taking pictures with her phone. So charming, Evelyn, very. Cozy. The way she said cozy made it sound like an insult. What are you doing here?" The words finally stumbled out. Blunter than I intended, an awkward silence descended. Then my mother rushed to fill it. "Can't family visit family?" "We've missed you, sweetie, missed me." After 3 years of proving the exact opposite. They just walked in. My father started inspecting the crown molding. My mother headed straight for the kitchen, already commenting on my choice of cabinet color. Rachel's children, taking their cue from the adults, began to run through the house, their excited shouts echoing in the quiet space I had so carefully curated. It felt like an invasion, a violation, my sanctuary breached. The peace I had so painstakingly built shattered in an instant. The polite, strained small talk couldn't last. It was like a poorly constructed facade, bound to crumble. After what felt like an eternity of them making themselves at home in my home, my mother rearranging things in the kitchen, my father adjusting the thermostat, Rachel critiquing my decor, the truth began to seep out, like water damage spreading across a pristine ceiling. Mark was the one to finally drop the first bomb. He cleared his throat. A self-important sound I remembered all too well. "So, Evelyn, Sterling Designs. Well, it's hit some hard times." He paused, looking at me expectantly. I said nothing. "Truth is," he continued, his voice losing some of its bluster, "the company's, well, it's pretty much gone. I lost my job." The irony was so thick, I could have cut it with a knife. The man who had orchestrated my dismissal, who had sneered at my green fantasies, was now admitting his own failure. My father picked up the thread, his voice heavy. We had to sell the house. Evelyn, the big family home, tried to salvage what we could of the business, but it wasn't enough. He looked down at his hands, a rare show of something that might have been defeat, or maybe just embarrassment. Then my mother, her eyes welling up with tears, real or feigned, I couldn't tell, reached for my hand. I instinctively pulled away. "Oh, Evelyn, darling," she began, her voice trembling. We have nowhere else to go. We were hoping. Well, you have this lovely big house, all by yourself." And there it was. The real reason for their unannounced arrival. The luggage, the forced smiles, they weren't here to reconnect, to apologize, to make amends. They were here because they needed something. They needed my house. The plan, as it unfolded, was breathtaking in its audacity. Mark and Rachel, with their 2 children, would take my master bedroom. Of course, my parents, Robert and Diane, would have the guest room, the one I used as my home office, my creative space. And me, Evelyn, oh, I could have the small, slightly damp room in the basement. It's quite cozy down there. Once you fix it up a bit, my mother chirped, as if offering me a delightful opportunity. Rachel was already mentally redecorating. We'll need to make this living room more child-friendly. Of course, and that antique desk in the office will have to go. We need space for a proper guest bed. She said it all so casually, as if my home, my belongings, were simply theirs to rearrange, to dispose of as they saw fit. But it was Mark who delivered the final, crushing blow. He looked at me, a flicker of that old arrogance returning to his eyes. "Look, Evelyn," he said, his voice taking on a condescending tone. "Let's be practical. You owe us. Dad and Mom raised you, educated you. They gave you your start at Sterling Designs. It's time you repaid some of that. It's what family does, owed them. After they had cast me out, left me to fend for myself, shown me in no uncertain terms that I was disposable, the sheer, unadulterated nerve of it left me speechless. My house, the symbol of my hard-won independence, was now, in their eyes, simply a resource to be plundered. The sanctuary I had built from the ashes of the life they had destroyed was about to be overrun by the very people who had set the fire. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. I could feel the walls closing in, the carefully constructed boundaries of my new life being demolished, one entitled assumption at a time. My mind was reeling, a chaotic jumble of shock, anger, and a deep, weary sadness. I needed to think. I needed air. I need some time, I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. This is a lot to take in. They seemed surprised by my lack of immediate, enthusiastic agreement. My mother started to protest, "But Evelyn, we've driven all day." My father huffed about the inconvenience, but I stood firm. "Perhaps you should find a hotel for tonight. We can discuss this further tomorrow." I didn't offer to pay. I couldn't bring myself to. They grumbled, but eventually, reluctantly, gathered a few overnight bags, notably leaving the bulk of their luggage in my hallway, a clear statement of their intent to return. The moment their car pulled away from the curb, the facade of calm I'd been desperately maintaining crumbled. I sank onto my sofa, my body trembling. It was then that I called my real family, my chosen family. Chloe was there within 20 minutes. A whirlwind of supportive indignation. Ethan arrived soon after, his quiet strength a calming presence. And Liam, my Liam, just held my hand, his steady gaze reassuring me that I wasn't alone in this. I recounted the whole surreal afternoon, the words tumbling out in a torrent of disbelief. "They want me to move into my own basement," Chloe repeated, her voice laced with outrage. "The basement of the house you bought, after they threw you out." Ethan just shook his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. "And they just assumed you'd say yes." "They did more than assume," I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. They acted like it was their right. We talked late into the night. Chloe, ever practical, suggested I record any future conversations. It was legal in our state with one-party consent. Ethan offered to connect me with a financial advisor he knew. Someone who specialized in helping families navigate difficult situations. Someone who could perhaps offer my parents and Mark alternative solutions that didn't involve them taking over my life. Liam listened, offered quiet words of encouragement, and reminded me of my own strength, the strength I had already proven. Sleep was impossible that night. I lay in my bed, in my house, feeling like an intruder in my own sanctuary. The ghosts of their entitlement lingered in every room. I got up, went to my desk, and started to write. I wrote down everything. The dismissal from Sterling. The cold words from my father, my mother's weak excuses. Mark's sneering contempt, the nights in my car. The humiliation, the slow, arduous climb back. I found old emails, screenshots of text messages, including Mark's final, dismissive words from 3 years ago. Don't contact us until you've got your life together. The irony was a cruel twist of the knife. By morning, a cold, clear resolve had settled over me. This was my home, my life. I had built it. And I would not let them take it. I texted them to come over at noon for a discussion about arrangements. I wrote. Their reply was immediate, enthusiastic. My mother even added a cheerful note about bringing a tape measure for furniture placement. I spent the morning preparing, not for guests, but for a confrontation. I moved my most valued possessions, the things that held sentimental meaning, into my bedroom and locked the door. I set up my laptop to record audio discreetly. I made a single pot of coffee, no food. This was not a social call. Chloe, Ethan, and Liam texted their support, parked just down the street, ready to step in if needed. Their quiet solidarity was the armor I needed. They arrived, all smiles and false bonhomie, carrying even more boxes. They swept in. My father already directing Mark where to put things, as if the deal was done. Before we go any further, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I'd like everyone to sit down in the living room. We need to have a conversation. They exchanged puzzled glances, but complied, arranging themselves on my sofa and chairs. The children were sent out to the backyard, Rachel watching them through the window. I remained standing. 3 years ago, I began, my voice low but firm. I lost my job at Sterling Designs. I was told my position was no longer essential. I looked directly at my father. His eyes flickered. I had some savings, but they ran out quickly. When I realized I was in serious financial trouble, I reached out to each of you. I turned to my father. Dad, when I called you desperate, you said, and I quote, you should have saved better. This is business, Evelyn. And then you hung up. His face flushed, but he said nothing. Mom, I continued, my gaze shifting to her. She was fidgeting with her purse, avoiding my eyes. You offered thoughts and prayers. You suggested I cut back on fancy coffee drinks when I was already eating instant noodles to survive. Then I faced my brother, and Mark, you told me I should have known my place. You said Sterling Designs needed someone with a more practical vision. You sneered at my green fantasies. You told me to reevaluate my spending. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. This, despite the fact that I had loaned you $2,000 a couple of years prior, money you never fully repaid. Mark started to protest, a flush rising on his neck, but I held up a hand, silencing him. When I came to your house for dinner, I said, addressing my parents again, begging for a small loan to avoid eviction. You made me feel like a failure, Rachel. I glanced at my sister-in-law, who was now staring intently out the window. You called me an irresponsible millennial. Mom, you suggested I find a husband to solve my financial problems. And Mark, I turned back to him, my voice dropping. You said something I will never forget. You said, we have real responsibilities, real families to take care of. You only have yourself to worry about. I walked over to my laptop, which was on the side table, and tapped the screen. The next day, Mark, you sent me this text message. Don't contact us until you've got your life together. We can't keep bailing you out. It's embarrassing for everyone, this. Despite the fact that none of you had ever bailed me out of anything in my adult life. The room was utterly silent now. The air crackled with the unspoken, with the weight of their past actions. After that, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I was evicted. I lived in my car for weeks. I showered at a gym. I used the library's Wi-Fi to apply for jobs. Not one of you called. Not one of you checked to see if I was alive. Not one of you offered a couch to sleep on, or even a hot meal. My mother's eyes were now filled with tears. But I couldn't tell if they were tears of remorse or tears of self-pity at being confronted. I rebuilt my life, I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even me. Without any help from any of you. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 70 hours a week. I took night classes. I saved every penny. I bought this house with my own money. Money I earned through hard work and perseverance. I swept my hand around the room, encompassing everything. And now, after 3 years of complete silence, you show up on my doorstep. With your luggage, expecting to move in, expecting me to give up my bedroom, my office, my home, and move into my own basement. My father finally found his voice, his face red with indignation. The past is the past, Evelyn. Family should forgive and forget. No, I interrupted, my voice sharp. No, Dad, you don't get to lecture me on what family should do. Family should have been there when I was sleeping in my car. Family should have offered me a place to stay when I had nowhere else to go. You will not be moving into my home. The shock on their faces was almost comical if the situation hadn't been so deeply painful. Michael stammered, But where are we supposed to go? As if it had never, ever occurred to him that I might refuse. I have arranged for you to meet with a financial advisor, I said, walking over to the coffee table and picking up the business card Ethan had given me. I handed it to Mark. Her name is Miss Albright. She specializes in helping families through economic hardship. She can discuss options with you, loan modifications, rental assistance programs, employment resources. She is expecting your call. My father stood up, his body trembling with rage. This is how you treat your family? After everything we've done for you, this is the most selfish, ungrateful thing I have ever witnessed. I met his furious gaze without flinching. No, Dad, the most selfish thing I've ever witnessed was when my own family abandoned me at my lowest point, and then had the audacity to show up 3 years later, expecting to dismantle the life I built without them for their own convenience. My mother was openly weeping now, but we're family. Evelyn, she choked out, as if those 2 words were a magical incantation that could erase everything. Family, I replied, my voice softer now, but no less firm. Family is more than blood, Mom. Family is about who shows up, who supports you, who loves you unconditionally, and I have built a family of my own. People who value me, who respect me, who would never, ever leave me to sleep in my car and then expect to claim my home as their own. As if on cue, there was a gentle knock at the door. I opened it, and there stood Ethan, Chloe, and Liam. My true family. They filed in, standing beside me, a silent wall of support. These, I said, gesturing to them, are the people who helped me when you wouldn't. The people who celebrated my successes instead of only appearing when they needed something. They are my family now. Mark's face contorted with a mixture of anger and disbelief. You'll regret this. Evelyn, I'll make sure everyone in the extended family knows how you turned your back on us. Feel free to tell them whatever you like, I replied calmly. But make sure you include the part where you all abandoned me when I lost everything. Make sure you tell them how you expected me to give up my home to the very people who left me homeless. I walked to the small table by the entryway, where my father had carelessly tossed his keys. I picked up the spare house key I had given my mother years ago, a key she had never returned. "I'll need this back," I said, holding out my hand. After a moment's tense hesitation, my father snatched it off his keyring and dropped it into my palm. It felt surprisingly heavy. "Now," I said, my voice quiet but resolute, "I would appreciate it if you would gather your things and leave my property. You are welcome to take Ms. Albright's card, but your housing crisis is not my responsibility to solve." The next half hour was a blur of strained silence and furious muttering. My father grumbled about ungrateful children. My mother alternated between tearful pleas and guilt-inducing sighs. Mark refused to look at me, his face a mask of stony resentment as he directed his children to the car. Rachel, perhaps the most pragmatic of them all, quietly pocketed the financial advisor's card when the others weren't looking. As they finally drove away, their car laden with the luggage they had so confidently brought, a strange sense of lightness settled over me. Chloe put her arm around my shoulders. "You okay?" she asked softly. I took a deep breath, the air in my home suddenly feeling cleaner, fresher. "I will be," I said, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I knew it was true. The girl they had abandoned, the one who had desperately needed them, she was gone. The woman I had become, the woman standing in her own home, surrounded by her true family, she didn't need them at all. The days following their departure were surprisingly turbulent. I'd naively assumed that once I'd stood my ground, drawn my line in the sand, the matter would be settled. Instead, my phone became a battleground. My father called repeatedly, his messages oscillating wildly between furious accusations. "You've made a colossal mistake, Evelyn. One you'll regret for the rest of your life." And clumsy, desperate attempts at negotiation. "Perhaps we could pay a small amount of rent after the first 6 months, of course." My mother's approach was pure emotional blackmail. Tearful voicemails about how she couldn't sleep at night, knowing her baby girl was so cold-hearted, so unforgiving. It was exhausting. Mark, true to his word, took to social media, posting vague but pointed screeds about selfish siblings and the erosion of family values, all carefully crafted to paint me as the villain without ever providing any real context. For a while, I felt the familiar sting of guilt, the ingrained desire to please, to keep the peace. But then, something unexpected happened. My Aunt Helen, my father's younger sister, the family rebel who lived several states away, called me. "Evelyn, honey, I heard what happened," she said, her voice direct. No preamble. "Your mother's telling everyone you threw them out on the street after they came to you in their time of need." I braced myself for more criticism, more judgment. But instead, she surprised me. I told her she was full of it. Helen continued, a note of exasperation in her voice. "I remember how they treated you when you lost your job at Sterling. Your mother insisted you needed space to figure things out on your own. I should have pushed back then, and I'm sorry I didn't." That conversation, that small act of validation from an unexpected quarter, was like a balm to a raw wound. It was the first crack in the narrative my immediate family was trying so desperately to construct. A few days later, my cousin Edward, Mark's contemporary, also reached out. "Hey Evelyn," he said, his tone cautious. "Look, I'm not taking sides, but I know there's always more to the story than what Uncle Robert and Mark are putting out there. If you ever want to grab a coffee and just talk, I'm around." These small gestures, these acknowledgments that my experience was valid, that the abandonment I had suffered wasn't something I had imagined or exaggerated, meant more to me than they could possibly know. Meanwhile, my chosen family, my true family, rallied around me with unwavering support. Liam was a constant, steady presence, sometimes just sitting with me in comfortable silence as I processed the emotional fallout. Chloe, bless her heart, declared a mandatory laughter therapy regimen, complete with ridiculous comedies and copious amounts of ice cream. Ethan checked in daily, ensuring the family drama wasn't affecting my work, and quietly, officially, offered me a partnership position at Phoenix Creatives. The company wouldn't be where it is today without you, Evelyn, he said, his sincerity unmistakable. It's time your title. And your compensation reflected that. A partnership. I was stunned, then overwhelmed with gratitude. It was during one of our chosen family celebration dinners. As Chloe had dubbed them, just the four of us gathered around my dining table, the one my mother had deemed too small for real family gatherings, that Liam raised his glass to Evelyn. He said, his eyes warm with admiration. Who taught me what real courage looks like? Standing up to family. To the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. That's harder than standing up to any stranger. And you did it with grace and with a strength that inspires us all. The contrast was stark. My biological family had seen me as a resource, a convenience, a solution to their self-inflicted problems. My chosen family saw me as someone to celebrate, to invest in, to build a future with. Over the next few months, I began to heal in ways I hadn't thought possible. My therapy sessions took on new dimensions as we explored the cycles of dysfunction that had defined my relationship with my parents and brother. My therapist observed, "Your family operated on a one-way support system, Evelyn. They expected you to give without limit, but felt no obligation to reciprocate. That's not a family relationship. That's exploitation." We talked about forgiveness, about boundaries. You can forgive someone for past behavior, she explained, without allowing them to continue those patterns in your life. Forgiveness is about your peace of mind, not about giving them another opportunity to hurt you. Those words resonated deeply. The lingering guilt, the whispered but their family, began to fade. I started to reclaim my space, both literally and figuratively. I painted my spare bedroom, the one my parents had earmarked for themselves, a bold, vibrant teal, a color my mother would have absolutely hated. I installed floor-to-ceiling bookshelves in my living room, proudly displaying my collection, no longer feeling the need to hide my passions or make myself smaller. Every choice, every small act of redecoration was an affirmation. This space is mine. I earned it. I deserve it. The ultimate act of reclamation came a few months later. I was updating my emergency contact information for a routine medical procedure. I glanced at the form, and there it was, Robert Hayes, father, the same man who had hung up on me when I was desperate, who had dismissed my pain. Without a moment's hesitation, I crossed out his name. In its place, I wrote Liam Carter, Chloe Park, Ethan Vance. All three. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. Usually, people just put one person, she noted. I smiled. I'm lucky, I replied. I have a whole family I can count on. The blueprints of our lives can be redrawn, sometimes by choice, often by necessity. What I learned is that the sturdiest foundations aren't always built with blood relatives, but with kindred spirits who show up with tools of support when your walls are crumbling. My home, my life, they're no longer filled with echoes of betrayal, but with the quiet hum of self-earned peace and chosen love. The girl they abandoned needed their validation. The woman I am today designs her own. If you've ever felt like your own family tried to write you out of your own story, or if you've had to rebuild from the ground up after a deep betrayal, please share your experience in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories matter here. If this journey resonated with you, and you believe in the power of quiet resilience, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We have many more blueprints of survival and rebirth to share. And if you feel moved to support the channel, the super thanks button is a wonderful way to do so. Sometimes, giving back is part of our own healing architecture. Thank you for walking this path with me. Remember, you are the master architect of your own life. Build it with strength, grace, and unapologetic joy.